So you blew up on Twitter, right? Like 500,000 in a year is incredible. Most people get that. You know, I've seen people that have been on X since like 2006 that just hit 100,000, 200,000, 500K in a year is wild. And I know a lot of it was because you covered the Andrew Tate case.
Yeah.
And I had seen a bunch of your tweets, and a lot of times when we were preparing for our shows, I look at some of your tweets and get information. So thank you for that. Apparently they're going to trial now, right? What's your take on what's going on right now? Obviously, there have been a few developments here and there, but what's your overall perspective on the case?
So my overall perspective on the case is it's probably one of the most lousiest, weakest cases that there is. And that's initially how I started, and you asked about how I blew up on Twitter. So like I came on Twitter, I think in December when they're about to get arrested. I think I only had a few hundred followers.
Yeah.
And I just thought, you know what, there's something, whenever something major happens, I'm always quite pessimistic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pessimistic about lots of issues. So I didn't know much about the Tates, but I thought, you know what, let me look into it. So as soon as I started looking into it, I mean, it was
And you have a background in law too. So.
Yeah, I have a background in terms of a law degree. So I'm not a lawyer, but just a law degree, right? And so what happened was I was looking into it and I was like, wait a sec, a lot of the arguments they're making against the Tates is weak. And what's worse on Twitter was everyone was attacking him.
Yeah,
like,
they were, yeah.
It was crazy. Like nobody was providing the other side, right? And so I became almost...
I'd say 10-1 easy.
Yeah.
Like 10-1 of people saying like, he's guilty versus...
I would say it's worse than that because maybe in terms of the people, but in terms of like large accounts, they were all just smashing him.
Yeah.
For example, there was a Twitter space and it was a full-on pile-on about how he's guilty and so on and so forth, right? And so when I thought, wait, my always psychology is when everybody's talking about one thing, I've got question marks over it, right?
Yeah.
I met Fuentes and I was talking about some of them issues as well, but maybe talk about
the forbidden one, yes.
Yeah. And so what happened was, right, I thought like, what's going on? So I researched it and then I was like, look, all of this is weak. Most of the claims that we're making on him are weak. And then what happened was I started researching it. I started doing threads. Them threads, like Tate's fans appreciated it because it was kind of analysing and breaking down a lot of their attacks. And then I went on Twitter Spaces and kind of debated with some of these Tate haters, who were crazy, right? And then that had a huge impact. And then what happened was in February time, I was in America in Orlando, and then
February of
2023.
Okay, last
2023,
year. Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And like I got in contact, or I somehow managed to get the contact of like some of the people who are connected to the women who were accusing the Tates.
Oh, yes. And keep in mind, guys, they got arrested in December of 2022.
Yeah.
And then, so what, 2 months later, you get a hold of information from the girls. Because at this point, not many people knew who the women were.
Yeah, exactly.
This is only 2 months in. Okay.
And so I'm in Florida, and then I basically start investigating because it's very close to Fort Lauderdale. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of like people who are connected.
Yes.
So I basically interview them, and then the whole case blows up. Like, it's crazy, the stuff I'm learning. Like, these women were basically falsely accusing so many people.
Yeah.
At that time, I was like trying to not tell too many people what I knew because I didn't want to like mess the case up for them as well.
Yeah,
so it was a balance by like using the information I had without messing it up for them. So like it was crazy. Like for example, one of the women was basically had a history of accusing people. A history.
She put a couple of them in jail, false accusations, all that. There's a guy suing her for it right now.
Yeah. So that whole case is from me because I investigated all of that and found it out when I came here, and then I passed it on to his team, and then I didn't report about it for a month because I didn't want to mess up the case because.
So you were the one that broke it.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
So Sulaiman, man.
Yeah. So I broke all that. So that entire legal case the Tates are doing against the girls in Florida.
The civil case.
Yeah, the civil case. Like most of that content is from me.
Nice.
Yeah. In being the source, like I investigated it. And then, so when you look at the women, and both women had nefarious past, both women had highly problematic issues.
Yeah.
And both of the women had actually had a history of being in this industry, but in a much more worse manner. And what I mean that is like they were either like escorts or, so on and so forth.
I know the chick from here in Florida definitely was involved in all that stuff. Sugar baby,
I'm telling you now. Like,
accusing guys falsely, all that shit.
It's even worse than that. Like, I think some of the information they've not even put in the file. So I don't know why. Maybe it's because it's too crazy or they couldn't find... Like, some of the stuff, like I had I don't even know if I'm legally about this, but I had some information about her where she literally had a diary of like guys that she was basically.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
it was crazy, like some of the stuff, and I know that's not in the case file, so I'm not
And
sure.
the other
maybe
one is British, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so she's Macedonian or Moldovan. I can't remember.
Moldovan,
one of the two.
yes,
Yeah,
she's Moldovan.
and then she was in Britain. And again, they have like extreme nefarious pasts. They were only in the tits in Romania for like 6 days.
Yep.
The one from America. Like, how can you be human trafficked for like 6 days? And you know the worst thing about it is for people who are against the tits, it's actually. Real people who are being human trafficked is basically minimizing their pain and suffering, because there are obviously people who do get human trafficked,
Of course.
but these chicks obviously aren't one of them. So yeah, I mean, exposing that, going on the debates kind of made me on Twitter in terms of the start
Yeah,
line.
because you were the only dissident in the situation when everyone was going after them. I mean, even to this day, people are talking shit on Twitter. It's wild.
Yeah, it's crazy. But now it's like there's a lot more people on Tate's side, and a lot more people who are have more of a.
Is more information come out.
There's more information's come out. They have the tools to basically push back, and the Tates are out themselves, and they're always the best at smashing anyway. So there's not that need as much. But initially there was that huge need.
Yeah, I remember.
Are you saying they may be part of a syndicate, a bigger setup? You would say.
Who, the girls?
Yeah, like a bigger group.
So again, I'm not sure what I'm allowed to say, but one of them did seem to be that. And obviously I'm not like a private investigator, so I didn't go that much deep into that. That was second woman, the one from the UK.
Okay.
But there seemed to be some nefarious connections in terms of some people that she knew in terms of from Moldova. Is it Moldova, Macedonia? I can't remember, one of them two countries.
Moldova, yeah. Moldova.
There was some kind of
One of the poorest countries in Europe. Like,
yeah, exactly. And you know, she's and then she's the one who basically blackmailed him and did many other nefarious things. When you read the whole thing, it just doesn't add up. It's clearly, as he calls it, a matrix attack. But what it is an attack on what he is perpetuating, and what he is perpetuating is the opposite of what the agenda is of whomever it is. We'll talk about in Rumble, right? So in reality, when you've got a guy who's, and I know you guys do the same thing, right? When you've got a guy who's speaking about men's rights, and why that's important is because in order to have a sustained family structure, you need to have men who have rights, and then you need women who have rights. And so when you're able to demonize and feminize men or remove their rights, you basically have a scenario where you destroy the family structure. So I believe that he was attacked because they want to control the hearts and minds of the youth.
Yes.
And he was impacting that.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
You can. The thing is, I think you could be influential, but if you're influential to teenage boys, that's when they come after you. You know what I mean? Like that, and that's the thing is, like, he had a huge audience of young guys, and they're like, "Oh, no, we got to do something to stop this." And I agree with him on this too. It's like your ability to speak freely is 100% contingent upon your influence. The more influential you are, the less free speech you have. You look at someone like The Rock. I loved him as a wrestler, but let's be honest. If you ask him about any of the hot button topics, he's not going to say shit. He's going to give a very neutral perspective that clearly comes from a publicist. It's probably not what he really feels. And he does that because he's extremely famous, and A-list celebs have to give A-list type answers, which means their publicists, I watched the Joe Rogan interview. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. Couldn't give an opinion on anything or a side on anything.
Well, what that shows is that your wealth, your fame has no impact on the autonomy of your mind, right? The autonomy of your mind is solely based on your own character as a man, right? Because if you're willing to say anything and you know the consequences are that you're going to lose everything, that's what makes you an individual.
Yeah.
And in reality, you mentioned many people, look, even on social media, I appreciate Musk giving us free speech, but again, you saw Musk who he had to kowtow to certain demands or whatever it may be.
Of course.
So in reality, being the most wealthiest man in the world, the most powerful man, because you have probably the strongest social media platform, and yet you don't have complete free speech. And so And what that means is wealth, power, influence hasn't given you the complete autonomy to say what you want. And I say a true test of a man is that he's willing to lose everything for what he believes in.
Yeah. It's a good litmus test for sure. And I would say most people definitely don't. On this side of the internet, right, when you have like certain views, right, conservative views, whatever it may be, you're kind of like in an echo chamber, right? Like people agree with you when you say there's two genders, stuff like that. But like when you go out into like the real world where normies are, and you say this stuff and they look at you like you're crazy. I just came back from doing Jubilee, right, which is a YouTube channel where they bring people of opposing views, etc.
When does it drop?
Huh? I think it's gonna come out in like a few days. For
this month, right?
Like, yeah, it's gonna come out like May 5th or 6th or something. They sent out an email. I forget the particular.
We gotta
day.
react to it, bro.